Hi, and welcome back to my channel. I'm having so much fun doing this book, and I've pulled out a few more of my tissue print stash and trying to look at options. This one's really bold. I like it. It's different. Haven't used that one yet, and we'll see where it goes. I'm going to use my special technique of wetting a paintbrush with clean water and going around the edges of the shapes that I want to keep from this tissue paper. I don't want to have straight cut lines because it's harder to hide that when I glue it down. So this is my technique. You've seen me do it before. It's a lot of, it's very easy to do, and it gives it more of a random rough edge that disappears and dissolves a little better once I glue it down to the page with my matte medium. So I picked out a little bit there, and now I'm picking out a little bit of a path, if you will, a path of dots that I think is quite fun. And of course, none of this is written in stone. I never know until I add my colors if I'm going to still like what I've selected. But until then, I'm really feeling good about this print here and the shapes that I've isolated, so we'll see what happens. It gets a little bit hard when it's all wet and finicky like this, and the bits that you tear away want to stick to the finger. So it's a little bit delicate, but bear with me. Watch what I'm doing, practice, and you'll get better at it. As I said, it's just a way of taking away what I don't want and making nice rough edges so that they disappear when I glue them down. Makes it more random, more, what's the word, more intuitive, more flowy. So I'm trying to come up with some border options as well. May or may not use them, but I want to have some choices so that when I'm at the point of gluing them down, I have a few to look at and grab from. So I'm going to isolate what I want from this and see where we go from there. I want to do a spread today that's full of bold, bright colors. And this is really bold dots and images. I think it'll be very dramatic when the two meet. I'll say it again, you could just do a colored spread and then paint things on, even get a sponge and dab and get a similar effect. But this is way more fun because it allows me the freedom and flexibility of moving it around. Whereas if I was to get a sponge with black paint and put it down on my colored spread, it's more permanent. It's harder to get rid of if I don't like it. So this gives me way more options, and it's way more fun to see the reveal of how it alters the colored spread beneath. So I'm playing around with options of shapes. And again, sometimes I do this before I add color, just to sort of give me an idea of where I could take it. So let's put those aside and start with some colors. I love this magenta color, I love this red, and I'm going to do my Indian yellow. And I might add some quinacridone Nicolazzo gold because I usually do. So these are wax crayons that I've had. You've seen me in my other videos. They're wonderful because I don't have to take a lot of paper away. They're just ready to go. Any wax crayons, even your children's or grandchildren's Crayola wax crayons will do. Anything wax. The whole idea is I want to make a resist on the paper before I add paint, and then we'll see what happens from there. So I'm picking colors that are similar to the paints that I have. So again, the wax, wherever I'm putting this wax, this I'm pressing really lightly. It will resist, but it won't be too dramatic. But it depends on the pressure. The more pressure you put on the crayon, the heavier and denser it goes down, the more it resists any paint that I put over top of it. So I'm putting these ones fairly light and delicate, and we'll see what happens. I'm trying to mix it up a bit, and I'm trying to make a very overall background pattern right now as my underpainting. Other times you've seen me do this with pencil crayons, or stamping and stencils. This is just another way. You've seen me do it a few times in quite a few of my videos. I really enjoy doing this technique, and I just felt like bringing this back. I'm pressing very, very hard on the white because I want it to be the boldest resist. And I'm getting my very soft, long bristled paintbrush out to move paint around the page delicately. I gave it a good spray of water. Now, I haven't protected the paper at all to work fairly quickly because it does absorb right into the paper if I don't move fast. It will absorb right into the paper anyway, but if I don't like something, I better dab it away fast. I also need to take care of any fluid water that goes and pools into the center fold there of the book, because that's where the string is, and that's a way for the fluid paint to bleed into the background pages behind. So I'm trying to stay on top of that so it doesn't bleed through very, very much. I also forgot to put protective pages behind each side, and I usually do. I got so excited to get started that I forgot to do that. I would highly recommend you do that before you begin, but you'll see how I deal with that as we go along. So the wax resist there in white is very dramatic. You can see, and especially when I put, what I'm going to do right now is dab away the background there because it bled through. I'm going to take care of that issue and put some paper towel down. And then when I put the strong paint and then spray it with water, you'll see that it will blast away the paint that's on top of the wax. There's a bit of imprint there from the tissue, from the paper towel, but that may not stay. Because this is so wet, it might bleed and blend and disappear. We'll see how things go. Again, it's all intuitive. I should have again put a plastic paper underneath, but I didn't. So I've clipped the page down because it was wanting to bow out and bend, and that's keeping it nice and flat. And let's see where we go. I'm going to put some protective paper towel below this right spread, the right page. It was a little bit stuck there, so I'm going to make sure that's unstuck and then add a nice clean sheet of paper towel. Again, dabbing that middle seam so that that's a very vulnerable place where the water pools and paint pools and spreads underneath. So I have to keep on top of that. So you can see the scribbles of all my wax crayon colors are still there, and we'll see where we go from here. The main thing here is any strong, fairly dense paint will go right over top of that wax, but as soon as I spray water to spread it around, it spreads away from the wax and reveals the wax. I'm going to play a lot with this spread as well with depth and movement across the page. So I'm going to start off light, but you'll see I will eventually add deeper and deeper values of all of these three colors so that I create a bolder, more colorful spread full of movement and energy. So it's quite busy on the bottom left and a very flat, bold, strong red on the top right. We'll see where we go, but I do like the variety. Now, if I do use that bold paint on the top and then dab dry paper towel over it, I will get the imprint of the paper towel and it will leave some texture. So I will be doing that. Right now I'm just putting more bold color down here, and you can see where I spread, it releases the paint from that white wax and reveals the coloring that I did underneath. I'm just going to play around quite a bit with layers, and here I'm going to dab hard with the paper towel on that dense red, and it left a nice paper towel patterned imprint, and I like that. It's kind of adding interest around the page. Besides the wax giving interest, the paper towel imprints will give interest as well. So again, layer after layer until I see where I'm going with this. I don't overthink it. I play it along as I go, and just have fun with the experience of watching it flow and change and develop into something special. So I'm adding more intense Indian yellow. It's quite wet there still, and I've got a wet paintbrush there, so it helps flow it around the page. And the more water, the more bright and lemony that Indian yellow goes. If I was to add it on a drier page straight out of the bottle, it would be a lot more gold. And I don't mind it blending over top of the pink. It provides a nice orange. And again, I'm going to spray back a bit so that I disperse that paint and reveal more of the crayon scribbles. And with so much there, I'm tipping the page to let some of that paint flow where it wants to the bottom of the page. I'm just mindful of dabbing any excess before it collects too much under the bottom of those pages. So you can see as I do all these steps, it really changes the page with each thing that I do. So I've decided to do more intense Indian yellow because it's not as wet, and I've added full strength. You can see how much darker it is, trying to balance the top left with the bottom right with a balance of color of that Indian yellow. So I've got a flow of yellow there and pink and red going the opposite way. And those lovely crayon scribbles incorporate all of the colors and give it some more movement and energy and flow. It's hard to say how much of that will show up when we're finished. They're there in the background, and I do that a lot. I like to put a busy background, and then some of it stays revealed and some of it gets hidden. And that's the joy of this intuitive painting, is you get surprises along the way. You never quite know what you're going to get, but I always love the results. I really do. So I keep dabbing that center fold. And I've decided to put a little more of the Indian yellow full strength in the middle there, just to keep the flow, keep it moving. You can do the same thing with heavier bodied paints, but I do like using high flow acrylics. They're a lot more fun. So I gave that a good dry, let it dry for a while. I went away and took a break. Now I've got my stash again, and those are the pieces that I isolated. Here are some more that were in the stash I pulled out, and I'm just showing you that there are, once you've got your paint down on the spread, it's kind of nice to show other options to see where it might take you. That frame-like part there in the middle where it's white tissue would disappear and reveal what's below if I was to use that. I do love how bold this is with the dots, and I've decided that's the one I'm going to stick with. And I do like these zigzag. It's like taking a needle with black thread and doing zigzags, and yeah, that was from a rubber stamp that I used on tissue prints papers before. So I'm going to use my wet brush again that's clean and isolate a couple of rows because I want to use some of that, but not all of it. And I want one full row, and then I've decided as I'm doing this that the second row I only want it to go halfway. So I'm going to go there and then up, and that way when I tear it off, it will be just half of the second row. And that just provides a little more interest. I don't like asymmetry and perfection of duplicates of things. I like to shake it up. So I think that's going to look nice. It balances that bold set of circles with a different effect. It's a little more delicate. So I've got my matte medium down, and I'm using that as a glue. And I've protected the back page there with paper towels so that none of that matte medium gets on the back of the page. I'm going to place this down delicately and then use a paintbrush to spread it around. You've got to be very careful because it's so wet and so delicate that if you press too hard, you can smudge it away. So it's a fine balance. And I decided to turn that around a bit, but it is delicate and it's all stuck to my fingers. It's really easy at this point to tear your tissue, so you have to be really, really careful. And I'm just making sure it gets pushed right into the crease in the center of the spread there. And then delicately fan it out to the left. And then cover it up with more matte medium. And when I do press with the brush and with my fingers, again, you have to be delicate. I've also decided I don't want too much of the edge of the tissue to show. So what I'm doing is pressing down with my finger, holding it in place, while with my thumb I'm scraping away any excess tissue paper, because I don't really want too much of that edge to show up after it's dry. And again, you've got to be careful because you've got to do this when it's wet. But as you stick that left thumb down there to hold it in place, sometimes the tissue print could stick to your thumb. So it's just a matter of getting a feel for it. It's not a big deal. I have a lot of that, so if I was to ruin it, I could isolate some more rows and do it again. So I'm showing you here with the arrows. Those are the edges of the tissue paper. I will show you how I can get rid of that or minimize the effect of that later on. I think this is just beautiful and bold. I love what I've isolated here and decided to keep. I think it's fun. I've got bold backgrounds and undulating depths of colors in the background, and then I've got these distressed, whimsical dots over top that are very, very bold and strong, that will, hopefully, the effect I am going for is to keep them with the look of floating on the top layer. So I've glued down matte medium, placed the tissue in place, and now I'm fanning out more matte medium over top. I'm not pressing too hard. Again, I don't want to disturb the tissue paper. I like how that is placed where the right circle is inside the wax circle. It's just wonky. It's fun. Very, very happy with this dramatic spread. These colors just give me a lot of joy. So I'm doing the same thing, place them down. Now there is a lot of tissue paper in between all the dots, and I'll show you how to deal with that in two different ways. Pressing that in the inner seam. So one of the ways to get rid of some of the excess tissue is just like I did with the zigzag. Hold the image that you want to keep on the page, hold it down with your thumb, and then use your other thumbnail to scrape away the excess tissue. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. Holding it down, using another finger to scrape away so that I reveal more of the bright pink and red underneath. That's not too bad. There's still a bit of tissue there, but we'll deal with it. I like that. If I was to cut with scissors around each of those dots, right now you would have seen at that point circular areas of tissue. They would have been much more bold. Now I've got this other piece here and I'm toying with the placement, but already I feel like it's wrong. I guess what's bothering me is I've got such wonderful undulating shades of colors down below, and then the dots and that extra pattern of black just makes the eye shoot up to the top left of the spread, and I don't want that. But just to make sure, I'm going to cut a straight line, place it down temporarily again just to see. And I've decided, no, I don't want that detail on the top left, so I'm going to just tear away the three circles and use them instead. And if you tear it away this way, then you don't have so much blank white tissue paper in between them to get rid of later. Another way of doing things. But I think this is much better as it is. I think it says what it needs to say. I don't need to do an awful lot now. I do not need to look for any layout. My layout is here. I'm happy with it. The rest will be finessing the colors. My mantra for my work is always color, movement, and energy. So I've got the energy from the black shapes. I've got the movement from the undulating colors. But I'm going to bring that out and create more levels of depth and forward and backward colors. And the more I add, so I like the idea of those black dots. They already look like they're floating on the surface, which I like. And the more I deepen some of the colors, the more it will seem like they recess to the back and the white and the black details will pop forward. The black is my accent in this case. The white is the second accent, but when we're finished, you'll see that there is less white. It's more smudgy areas of white. The accent is definitely going to be the black. This is so much fun. Really, this came together quite quickly for me. I didn't have to overthink it. And I love on the top right there, I love the top right pattern there from the orange and the pink and the white from the imprint of the paper towel. So now I'm going to show you masking, which means I'm going to cover over those edges of the tissue that I don't want to see with stronger strength of those colors I've used. I'm going to get a small brush out and I'm going to use it right from the lids or the tubes of the color. And I'm going to mask over top areas where I want the tissue to the edges of the tissue to sort of, they're not going to go away, but they're going to be minimized. The effect and the visual effect of it, the tissue edges will be minimized. And doing this at the same time, I'm creating depth of the same colors and shooting some of it back and some of it forward. This is the part I enjoy the most out of all of my abstracts. This is the 3/4 of the way finished, and this is the part where I don't have to overthink because I know what I've already got. I'm just enhancing a few areas, and my mind just gets into the zone. I'm not thinking about anything. There's no pressure of figuring out what the spread wants to be. I already know what it wants to be. I'm just enhancing a few things. This is so much fun, so much mindfulness. I'm really in my zone. So you can see now I'm taking care of edges of the tissue, but at the same time I'm creating more depth, smudging things around with my finger so that I don't have paint strokes. I want things to blend beautifully so that you don't even know that there are paint strokes. And as I cover up the edges of the tissue, I've decided as well that I want to make a bolder statement of that gold at the bottom right. And that's my quinacridone gold, by the way, which blends beautifully with the Indian yellow. It's just so stunning, my favorite color. And if I smudge with my finger and create different levels of pressure, then it blends beautifully with the color underneath. And I'm just moving around more with the dry brush, smudging it around, and then using my finger to smudge it more. Now that I've done the Nicolazo gold, I'm going to bring out more of the lemon yellow of the Indian yellow. And then I'll deal with the pink. So that's full strength. It blends beautifully with the Nicolazo gold, and as it hits the white, and as I blend with less pressure, I get more of a lemony yellow out of it. So I'm minimizing the white on the page, but doing it in a very smudgy kind of way. And where that wasn't working so well and I didn't want clean edges, I just reactivated it with water and smudged a bit. Still a little bit too much white and a little bit too much tissue, so I'm doing the same technique. This is so much fun. One of these days, and I am working on a very large watercolor piece on paper this last 2 weeks, and I want to show it to you when it's finished because it shows you a compilation of all these techniques I'm showing you. So when I show you that large watercolor video, you will see I won't be able to show you the techniques because it's already done, but I will be able to zoom into areas and discuss with you how all these techniques were used in that large watercolor. I think you'll have fun with that. I think I'm going to do that as my next video after this one. It gives you an idea of what you can do, the directions you can take all these little lessons that I've shown you. And I have a very large frame, glass framed, matte framed piece on the wall right now that I did a black and white photograph of close-up of some rocks, which was quite amazing. But I'm getting tired of that. I want more color on my wall, so I'm going to use that frame with the glass and the mat to put this new large that I've got next, the new large watercolor painting. And I think you'll agree it'll be really fun. It'll be a nice piece to have on my wall. So as I'm talking, I'm just adding depth. Most of the tissue edges have been dealt with. Now I'm basically just playing around with depth of all the background colors, shooting things backwards and bringing the black forward. There was a lot of pooling of water there, so I was just dabbing it back. Minimizing the white. I'm trying to get rid of some of the noise of the busyness of some of that white smudging. And the more color and the more depth of color I add, the more I calm down that busyness and create more movement and energy instead, more movement and depth. I don't like that strong edge there, so I'm trying to minimize that a bit and blend it more, because I don't have strong edges anywhere else except for the black. So I don't want to do strong edges with the colors. So it's going to take a few layers. And unfortunately, there's a bit of bright reflection above that dot there. That's just reflection from the light. So that's not white there. That's just a pool of water that's reflecting from the light. So again, I'm just going really, really strong. This crimson red is going to be my deepest color. And I'm even adding more because I want to shoot it all to the background. Plus I want to add more color there and do more imprint from a paper towel, so I get more pattern up above there. And I can't do that effectively, and yes I do, unless I do a thicker coating of a dark color. So I'm going to press clean paper towel with that imprint over that so that you can see why I did that. I had to use darker and then press on it to lift some of that darker. And whatever I lift, it reveals pattern below that. So it just gives a little bit more interest. I like that. That's a good pattern. That edge there, that vertical line is still a bit too strong. So I'm adding more full strength magenta. And then I'll let that blend a bit and I'll smudge some of that back. And I've sort of lessened the strength. I've got to do it a little bit more. There I go. As I dab that back, I get rid of the ridge of that red line that was there before, and I added a little bit more pattern where it picks up with the gold. Those black dots are really starting to float to the surface. I've decided with some of that pattern on the top right, I would enhance a few of the darker magenta dots. So I got a really fine brush out and I'm just making a few dabs there just to let them come forward. As you've seen in my other work, I like patterns to go strong and then disappear and fade in a direction, and that's what I'm trying to do here, is go from faded to darker. And then I'm bringing just a little more of that magenta towards the corner. I'll dab a little of that back. So that's fun. It's just something different. I didn't want it to be too bold. I wanted it to be subtle and distressed. So I've got a little bit. The only thing left to do now is the top right edge and the bottom left edge. There's a little bit of white that didn't quite, that's at the corners, and I would prefer to have the colors disappear right over to the edge, just like the gold did on the top left and right, bottom right. So I'm getting my full strength magenta out, and I'm going to just, with a coating of protective coating sheet underneath, so I don't get it on the page below, I'm just going full strength magenta right to the edge of the paper so that it brings the eye right to the edge. I like that. I didn't want a white line up in the top there. That really helps to complete and match what's happening on the rest of the spread. I think that made a difference. I had a bit of a smudge there of magenta I didn't want, so I had to reactivate that with water and dab it back and just smudge it a little bit more. I don't want any strong paint lines. I want them all to be smudgy. Now let's do the same thing with the bottom left. Some of that bottom left and bottom of the edge there that I'm touching up now, that was probably matte medium on my fingertips before when I was moving the pages back and forth, and it dried and left slight tips of fingerprints. So this really helps by covering over with full strength magenta with a brush and then fanning it out and smudging it on the edge towards the middle of the page. And as you can see, I think you agree that that's really improved the borders, if you will. I didn't want white borders on any part of the edges of the page. This just sort of makes everything go bold out to the corners of the book. And I like bringing out a little more depth of that magenta like I did on the top. And I have to do that in layers because if I start lighter and then I decide I want darker, that's okay. You can always go darker. A little harder to remove and go lighter. So as you can see, by going deeper now with these colors, it's taken away some of the busyness of the page and it's made it bolder. All those original background scribbles that I made with wax crayons, they're still visible everywhere, but they're very subtle and disappearing into the background. So they're there, but they're going back a few layers. I really enjoy playing with layers. So much fun. I'm happy with this. So I've got a diagonal of yellow and a diagonal of pink. And then I've got my black dots as the accent, and there are smudges of white throughout. I'm really happy this is done, and here are the details. So much fun. I'm glad you joined me, and I hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.